If you've ever held back from making content because you don't feel like you're an expert, you're not alone. You might be thinking, why would anyone listen to me? Or I'm not qualified to teach this. But here's the thing, you don't have to be a subject matter expert yet in order to provide value through your content. So if you're not a subject matter expert yet, it's probably best to avoid teaching others how to do things, but rather teach them how you do things. Focusing on sharing your efforts and experiences is something that nobody can dispute. And a lot of people will find value in that because you've put in time and effort into something and then condense that into a digestible piece of content that they can consume and extract knowledge from. But what does that content actually look like? Well, I found two ways to create content that nobody can criticize. That's effort-based content and how I content. Effort-based content typically comes from you doing stuff or running experiments and just sharing those results with your audience. So what would I do if I made 10 videos in 10 days? And then you do that and then you share those results with your audience. Now, somebody that hasn't done 10 videos in 10 days or doesn't have the time or expertise to can simply extract the nuggets of learnings and knowledge that you've learned from the video you make after you do that. So that's where the value comes from. So here's another example is I tracked my diet for 100 days. This is what happened. Now, there's two ways to go about making a video like this. One is you're a nutritionist, which is you go through 4 years of school and you immediately have credibility because you've done that. So that's the effort that's being condensed into a video. So you trust a nutritionist implicitly, even if they haven't done the thing yet, because they've gone through the 4 years of school, aka they put in effort. Now, if you're just a random person and you've tracked your diet for 100 days, like some people don't do that and they can't do that. And they're going to watch your video because they're curious to know what you've learned after 100 days. And they probably can extract out of your 8-10 minute video without putting the 100 days in. Now, here's the interesting thing. As you run these experiments and do effort-based content, you actually gain what's called trench knowledge, which is the insights that are earned through experience rather than learning through theory like a book or a course. And trench knowledge is actually what separates an amateur from a subject matter expert. So as you do more experiments and as you learn through trial and error, you can actually become a subject matter expert through this process. Now, the second type of content is how I content. This is essentially the frameworks, processes, repeatable mechanisms, things that you come across that you create for yourself that you're just sharing with the world. Now, you're not preaching this is how to do things, but you're just sharing this is how I do things. And people can take value from that if they want, and if they don't want to, they don't have to. So these two methods work because you're just sharing your personal experience and things that you've done and things that you've learned. And if it's helpful for other people, they'll be able to take that and they'll see you as a valuable content creator. So I want to share a quick story of how I came across this concept. I was working on a Google Ads agency a few years ago, and I recently shut that down. But when I was doing it, I started to make content to get leads and build authority in the space. But as I was doing it, I was like, dang, I kind of feel like an imposter. I'm facing imposter syndrome, even though that I had clients that I was working with and I was proficiently good at it. I felt like an imposter because I wasn't doing it for long enough. And there were people on the internet that were like 15,000 hour Google Ads masters. And I'm like, wow, I cannot make content when people like that exist. But I think that was the wrong way of thinking about it. So, in order to fix my imposter syndrome, what I started to do was just sharing stuff that I would do. So, some examples of this included how I read conversion rates, how I help my vet client get 30 leads in 30 days. I made 100 ads. Here's what I learned, right? So things like this are indisputable pieces of evidence that I knew what I was doing and that I was actively doing it, and it worked. People actually saw what I was doing and they shared the content and they commented like, "Hey, this is super helpful," and they would ask me questions. So I actually have another video talking about how I promoted my content to get 5 leads in my first 5 days of baking content. And you can see some of the comments I was getting, some of the DMs I was getting after posting content. So check that out if you want to see more proof of how this works. But the premise of that story is that building in public or sharing the efforts and your experiments that you're doing is going to help build authority by naturally positioning you as someone in the trenches. And I think that has a lot of value. So that's a lesson that stuck with me. And now I'm doing it again for this founder-led video marketing agency that I'm building, where I help founders with building their personal brand online and then capturing that attention and turning it into revenue. So those are the two types of content that I've come across that have worked well for me. So if that's helpful for you, feel free to steal that. And if you want to work with me or get a free like personal brand audit or YouTube channel audit, feel free to check the link in my description here. For a Calendly, it's just going to be a free consultation where I'll work with you and see what we can do for your business.